Good day, class. Today we'll be discussing history and philosophy of science. We have various lecturers that will teach you history and philosophy of science, like from philosophy departments, statistics, microbiology, biochemistry, but I'll be coming from the chemistry aspects. So I'll be teaching you environmental pollution, hazards, and climate change. But before we start, I want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Chinwe Priscilla Okonkwo from the Department of Pure and Industrial Chemistry, Faculty of Physical Sciences. Introduction. When we talk about environmental pollution, hazards, and climate change, they depict a negative effect, which we all know. Environmental pollution is just any unfavorable changes in our environment that have negative impact, maybe on plants, animals, and humans. We notice that civilization and our activities have caused a lot of pollution in our environment, both atmospheric pollution, air pollution, and various types of pollution, maybe from industrial plants and the rest. So this keeps on increasing, and which causes imbalance in our ecosystem. So, how do we prevent this? How do we know the problem? For you to solve a problem, you have to understand the problem before you can give a solution to this problem. So, when we talk about environmental hazard, they are the extreme events, maybe natural or anthropogenic, that have exceeded the tolerable range which we can accept. And when we talk about climate change, it's just an alteration in a region's average weather condition. If we can recall, prior in this year, you notice that in January it was very hot. Unlike other Januaries, they are not usually hot. They are still cold. December, January, we are still in Hamatan. But this year, it was. Did you notice that there is a shift in the weather condition? That is climate change. So, it's as a result of accumulated weather condition that gives rise to our different climates. So, what are natural hazards and disasters? When you talk about natural hazards and disasters, there are negative impacts or occurrence. This could lead to loss of life, damage, or even economic damage. It can lead to a lot of lost lives and properties. Just imagine the wildfire gulped a whole city, which was not able, people were not able to control in time. So it is a menace to us. So when we talk about natural disaster, it has passed the tolerable range. It is very hazardous. So hazard is an event that is likely to have a negative impact. But when we talk about disaster, it already has that negative impact. So natural hazard can lead to natural disaster. Not all natural hazard can lead to disaster, but all natural hazards are not okay with us. So examples of these natural disasters includes earthquakes, tsunami, hurricanes. When you talk about a place where there is a hurricane or tsunami, the loss of lives and properties are being lost there. So when we talk about anthropogenic hazard, there are those ones caused by man-made. There are those ones we constitute by ourselves. Maybe dangerous goods, transportation, garbage dump, riots, oil spills. There are those ones we can control the effects. But all those natural ones, we cannot control them. They just occur naturally. They are just man-made. They are not instigated by people. Just like when we talk about the COVID, which caused a lot of lives. It was just simulated in the lab. It was not meant to kill people. They were doing an experiment, but it ran out of hands. It's man-made because it was synthesized in the lab. But anyone which occurs naturally, they are natural hazards. But those ones which are instigated by man, they are anthropogenic. So we talk about air pollution. Air pollution is just any undesirable changes in the physical, chemical, or biological properties of air. they have negative impact on all living things. So there are many factors which influences this air pollution. If you can notice these people that notice this woman, she is not comfortable with the what she's perceiving in the environment. If you notice those people passing, they are not comfortable with what is occurring. So there are a lot of things which can cause air pollution, but all you know that the pollution is not tolerable with humans living in the environment. So the factors which influence these effects of air pollution, you talk about the concentration of pollutants. Assuming you are in a car and you are traveling for a very long distance and there is a traffic lock or jam, and you're in the car for 30 minutes and you are behind a big lorry that whose exhaust is just opposite to your car, how do you feel? The pollution is much. If you stay in that car for a long time, you might run the risk of suffocation, or present another scenario whereby you are sleeping in the night and your genset is just faced directly to your room. Did you notice that you can barely sleep? And if you sleep in that room till the next morning, if there is no proper ventilation to exhume all those fumes out of your room, you might suffocate. People even die from that. So air pollution is very bad. Or duration of exposure to the pollutants. You talk about the concentration, you talk about the duration, and the type of the organism it affects. Different air pollution has different people it affects the most. So they have a similar negative impact on animals the same way they have on humans. So ingestion of contaminated forage contaminated with atmospheric pollutant causes chronic poisoning. Or we talk about arsenic or lead or molybdenum. All these causes air pollution. So the major causes are maybe the overuse of fossil fuel in transportation, just like when I explained to you of a lorry in front of you whose exhaust pipes is faulty. Or you talk about smoke start from smelters, thermal power plants, those living in industrial layout, maybe in Port Harcourt, Lagos, where there are a lot of industries, assuming a lot of heat from there. Or air pollutants, maybe both gaseous and pollutant produced from different industries. Or decomposition of garbage, people dump refuse anywhere, maybe after 1 year or 2 years the place is already stinking. Or when they dump refuse in waters, those water bodies, all those places will be smelling. So it can be harmful to us. So we should try as much as possible to make our environment free from air pollution so that we don't receive this effect. Another pollution we're going to talk about is water pollution. If you can see that water body or with a lot of plastics in it, or you can see the next page where you see a pipe from an industry channel directly to this water, do you think people living around this environment can be able to use this water? They can't use it fit for drinking. So water pollution is any undesirable changes in the physical, chemical, or biological properties of water that may have a negative impact on living beings, maybe on the ponds, rivers, oceans, any water body. Anything that you have put into that water that is undesirable is already a pollutant to the water. So where are the sources of this water pollution? Maybe the discharge of untreated domestic sewage into rivers, or excessive fertilizer and pesticides used in agriculture, because all this land they have water under it that channels back to the main source of water. Toxic waste discharge from factories and refineries, you can see that pipe that is channeled from an industry to the water body. Oil spills by tankers accidentally release oil into the oceans. So some of these water tankers, they might even dislodge their waste into the water bodies. Improper litter disposal such as plastic bags, wrappers and bottles, you can see how all of them are littered in this water. There are problems. What are the effects of this water pollution? They can cause waterborne diseases like when we talk about our typhoid, cholera, dysentery, jaundice and the rest of them. Or they might toxic waste materials, so heavy metals, cyanides and many organic and inorganic matters when they are released into these waters. They might affect the aquatic ecosystem and even lead to untimely human death for us. So next one we're going to talk about is soil pollution. So soil pollution has to do with any chemicals or other alteration that destroy the natural environment of the soil. So any presence of man-made chemicals or alteration in the natural soil environment is also known as soil pollution. You can see all these things can constitute soil pollution, maybe household waste, plastic, mining, erosion, agriculture. All this causes soil pollution. So petroleum, hydrocarbons, solvents, and a lot of them, all these things constitute to anything that will reduce the soil fertility is a pollutant to the soil. So soil pollution can have a variety of negative effects on ecosystem as well as the humans and plants, because we are affected, because if we don't have healthy habits, we get affected from the soil. So some of the effects of this soil pollution, that it can decrease the fertility of the soil, it can even decrease the nitrogen fixation or release pollutant gases or contaminating of drinking water sources, bad odor and gas emissions, waste management issues. So all these effects on the soil also affect our health. So another pollution we talk about is noise pollution. If you can see that woman, she's closing her ears because the noise is too much. Noise pollution, anything that has to do with our ear, the noise is not within our tolerable range, it is already a pollutant to us. So noise pollution is any unpleasant, discomforting sound is defined as noise pollution. The continuous presence of harmful, unwanted, annoying noise in the environment. This can be caused by any object that makes noise. Maybe you have a television or radio or loudspeaker, and when you turn on your TV, the TV is so loud that it's as if you are playing it for the whole people in the environment, or your radio or your loudspeaker. It should be within a tolerable range. It's because some of you are already attuned to just hearing this loud noise, because you cannot even hear well unless their volumes are amplified. It is not the proper thing. Even if not for your sake, for people around you, you should make sure you do not overuse some of your systems. So impacts of this noise pollution, they have unsettling effect on us. Talk about when you are not able to sleep the whole night because of your neighbor is playing a loud music on his music player. You will not be able to sleep. You might run the risk of being dizzy or irritation. Talk about sleep deprivation and stress. So imagine that you are not, it is a continuous thing. Maybe you live maybe along Abakaliki street where they play music all through the night, and your house is very close to a club that they play very loud noise. How will you be able to sleep? And if you turn that to a habit, you might have your BP might rise because your sleep deprivation is so high, you feel stress, you don't have proper sleep. And some of you, when you always put earpiece in your ears every time you are walking, you are always on earpiece, you might have ear problems and hearing loss. By the time you are old, you're already wearing hearing aids so that you be able to hear well. There are some measures for us to reduce this noise pollution. We have to first of all have to attain self-control, because assuming that you have a birthday party or you have your wedding anniversary party, is just common maybe once in a year, but not every day in day out you always on loud music. There is a problem there. You have to first of all cultivate the habit of self-control, reduce the noise level to a tolerable range, that it doesn't make so much noise. So loudspeaker should not be used, if possible once in a very long while, so that we don't upset our neighbors. And people should not play loud music or use their horn excessively. Just that every time you always on the horn, your horn you blow it so hard that everybody around will know that it's not only you that will pass on that road. You want to bypass everybody on the road, you blow your horn so loud. Please let us cultivate self-control to reduce our noise level. The next one we're talking about is radioactive pollution. This is the most dangerous part of pollution because it affects lifetime for a lifetime. This pollution. Just talk about the Hiroshima Nagasaki war in 1946. That place, people, no life exists there till now. Agriculture doesn't exist because of a bomb that was detonated how many years ago. Till now, life does not exist there. So to tell you the effect of this radioactive pollution, so it causes cancer, congenital disabilities, blindness, infertility, even permanent changes in the soil, water, and air level of that particular environment. So each species have an infinite lifespan subject to mutation as a result. So it's not even only that it can affect the gene mutation of that particular person that was there when these bombs were detonated. So the life might not even exist again because of what the bombs, the effect it had. That's why most of these countries that have nuclear weapon, they are addressed not to use them. They don't use them because if they use them, the whole world can sink in one day because they are the most dangerous. When we talk about radioactivity, is a process by which an unstable atomic nucleus loses energy by radiation. So a material containing unstable nuclei is just considered to be radioactive. So there are certain elements that composes matter emits particles and radiation. So a phenomena whereby there is a disintegration of an atomic nucleus is known as radioactivity. We have our alpha, beta, and gamma rays, which we can see there. So alpha, they are the most distinct rays. We also have the X rays after we have this alpha, beta, gamma rays. So the alpha rays, they are the electromagnetic. They are made of positively charged particles. If you can see the helium atom there, which shows you that is a positively charged atom. So when you talk about the beta, they are the negatively charged particles. They consume of streams of electrons. You can see how it is denoted there play. And also our gamma rays are electromagnetic radiation, which charges opposite that of H rays, and they have shorter wavelengths. So these rays are briefly, they penetrate living tissues and have an impact on the cells. They also help in treatment of cancer and other diseases. Irrespective they are dangerous, they also have health benefits. So these rays can be created to emanate from an element. So alpha rays travels shorter distance, maybe 100 meters. Beta travels longer, and gamma travels longer distance than the two of them. So radioactive contamination. Radioactive contamination could occur if radioactive materials are released into the environment as a result, maybe an accident or natural event or terrorist attack. Or if you can see how that place is, you notice there is a radioactive contamination in that environment. See how they are properly kitted up so they don't assume themselves with any radioactive decay that has occurred in that environment. So people can be exposed and they contaminate their surroundings and environment. So they have to be a proper check in those environments, check the tolerable limit of it to know how best to prevent that environment from people being contaminated with radioactive instrument material. So radioactive waste is defined as any material containing or contaminated with a radioactive nuclide or a concentration greater than a safe level. So radioactive waste containing radioactive elements serves no practical purpose. So whenever such occurs, there should be help immediately so that we make sure that other lives are not affected. So radioactive pollution and their sources. So we can have the natural sources, or some of them are even man-made. When we talk about the natural sources, we can talk about the cosmic rays or terrestrial radiation. They are natural source of this radioactive pollution. But when we talk about man-made, maybe medical sources or industrial sources, nuclear exploration, nuclear power, nuclear and radiation accidents. So when you talk about people who expose themselves a lot to H-rays, that is why before you do an H-ray, they ask you, when was the last time you did an H-ray? If it's not within 6 months, they won't allow you to do an H-ray because they don't want you to expose your vital organs to these rays. If you do that, you endanger your vital organs. That is why people that are even there, they cover themselves well with the proper PPEs to make sure that they don't get contaminated with these harmful rays. Chemical hazards. Chemical hazard is any substance, regardless of its form, that has the potential to endanger people's health or harm the environment. So chemicals are good. We use them to synthesize products. We use them to produce some things. Just like when we talk about production of our Lucky soap, when we talk about production, almost virtually everything you use have some chemical undertones to them. But the dangers are also not far away from us. But if we protect ourselves from these chemical things, we we make sure that we wear the proper PPEs. If you're in the lab, you wear your lab coat, wear your nose mask, wear the proper PPEs. You will not endanger yourself. So some chemicals, when you inhale them a lot, you have to take proper nutrients so that they neutralize, so that you don't assume, you don't take them in often, because if you take them in often, you might denature your internal organs, which is not also good for you, even in your reproductive systems or your internal organs or your lungs and the rest of them. So when you inhale them, you make sure that you take proper measures immediately, because there are some, even if you wear your nose mask, cover your glasses, there are some that may enter into yourself. So you have to be careful whenever we handle chemicals. So there are different types of chemical hazard. We talk about the health hazard. So this refers to chemicals that have serious and long-term negative effect. That's why it is top number one chemical hazard, the health. So there are flammables, there are also flammers. These are chemicals that are highly flammable, maybe gases that catch fire or ignite when exposed to them. We talk about the irritants or hazardous chemicals. So the presence is usually temporal. So these days, some of them even have long-term impact. So, but we should try to prevent ourselves from there, and they can endanger public health by depleting the ozone layer. We talk about gas under pressure. This refers to gases which have been stored under pressure and may explode if heat or refrigerated, causing burns or injury. Just I'm assuming that you bought gas from a gas station and you left that gas in your boot after 3 days. Maybe you're along the road and due to it's in the boot, there's already a compressed gas, and inside your boot that there's no air, it might just blow up, and if it blow out, it might cause accident for you and the person at your back. So we should prevent anything, any gas under pressure. There should be air. Sometimes the air them when they are left there for a long time, so that it does not burst or splash on people or cause domestic accidents, even at the home when you use some of them to work. They are corrosive. So this refers to chemicals that when contacted can cause severe burns and tissue damages, or explosive. These are chemicals that can explode or cause large explosion. We also have oxidizers. This presents chemicals or substance that when exposed to other chemicals or elements, they cause severe physical hazards such as fires or explosion. We also talk about hazardous. Yes, those are hazardous environments and those are toxic. So all these different types of chemical hazard should be tried to be avoided at all costs. Risk assessment. When we talk about all this, we have been talking about hazard, pollution, environmental change, climate change. All these things, there are risks. How do we assess risks? So when we first of all identify, we should first of all identify there is a risk. So this risk should be connected to those chemicals that should be assessed, along with the likelihood that those risks will materialize. So industry will be able to determine the seriousness of the potential consequences of this risk through a thorough risk assessment, which risks will be prioritized and dealt with first and can be decided by using this process. So risk assessment, we come to a particular location, we identify the risks there. So the one with the higher risk should be sought a way to handle first. So after you've assessed the risk, maybe that's why we have HSE, health safety equipment, HSE, those people that make sure that the safety of an environment, especially in oil companies or all anywhere where there is great risk, there should be a safety worker there. So what do? They have to assess the risks, because it's when they assess the risks, they know the one that should prioritize first before they will start talking of the next one. When you have assessed the risk, the next thing is you have to control the risks. So for you to control the risk, first you have to remove all hazardous substances. You have to remove anything that can cause problem in that environment, remove all hazardous chemical completely and stop using them. Two, you can substitute them. Look for substitutes or use less dangerous chemicals as a replacement. Just like when you are producing your liquid soap, people use formalin, which is not good for health. But we have now noticed that methylparaben, which is also very good for the skin, can be replaced with it. You have now replaced a better one to substitute it. Have you seen? So, or engineering control. So, after the alter the process, maybe reducing human contact with chemicals or physical separating people from them. Talk about a place where there is a corrosion. You might decide to galvanize it or paint it. It's an engineering control. Or you build, maybe the pipe is already getting rusted. You can grease it up or you can polish it up. So there has to be some controls to also help us reduce this risk. Also, administrative controls alter the way people think by switching up their schedules or job responses. Just I noticed that people, when they dispose refuse here, I can give a strict order. If you dispose refuse there, you pay 2,000 naira or pay 5. You see that nobody will dispose refuse there. Or when you put serious administrative control, put people in charge to make sure that those policies you have put in place stands. So when you talk about personal protective equipment, there are those things we wear to prevent us from running the risk of this chemical hazard. It's talked about by our safety boots. We wear it in the leg so that maybe a harmful chemical, when it pours, it doesn't splash on our feet. Just imagine that you're wearing a plain slippers in the lab and H2SO4 pours on your feet. It might snatch off your skins there. But if you are wearing a boot, it first of all falls on the boot. Before it can even penetrate the shoe and get to your leg, you must have removed your legs from those shoes. Or you talk about you wear your lab coat or you wear your overall if you are working in an oil company or in a company that requires you to wear an overall. But in the chemistry lab, we wear lab coats. We also talk about wearing the nose mask. The nose mask protects your nostrils from breathing all these harmful chemicals. You talk about wearing your eye gloves so that when these chemicals that are itchy to the eyes doesn't get to your eyes, that's because you're already protecting your eyes with your gloves. You talk about helmets such a way that if a heavy object falls on you, maybe you are bending down and something falls on you, your head is already protected. Or you wear your gloves so that if you are working with those chemicals, they have to first of all touch on those gloves before you enter your hands. So these are things to give us some first aid so that we don't fall the risks immediately, maybe when we fall short of these chemical hazards. So the next one we'll talk about is climate change. Okay, we talk about containment. So containment is the primary method of preventing contamination from entering the environment. So we can prevent all these contaminations from entering our environment by when we prepare ourselves or wear the proper clothes. So when radioactive materials concentrated to a detectable level outside the contaminant, the area affected is referred to as contaminated. So something is contaminated whereby the range in which the radioactive materials are concentrated, they are not something we can tolerate again. Is the pollution is too much, so that environment is said to be contaminated. Can't you see how that man is trying to protect himself to not to run the risk of being contaminated with the radioactive rays in that environment? So there are numerous techniques for contaminating radioactive materials so they do not spread and become contaminated outside of the environment. So in the case of liquid, we can do that using high integrity tanks or containers. So we equipped it with maybe some system, or we can use glove box, which is a common type in hazardous laboratory. So when you use our gloves to protect ourselves, or you can use overall. You see that man is already wearing overall. He's using a very good nose mask and he's protecting his hands from gloves because he's working on radioactive rays. If you can remember Maria Curie, who also invented these radioactive rays, she died of even this ray because when she was doing this experiment in the lab, she was always putting the test tubes in her pockets. So when she finally discovered these rays, she also died of these rays because her body has taken so much of these rays. Even everything inside her kitchen had to be poured into her grave because they don't want people to get contaminated with these rays. She discovered something for us, but that thing also killed her. So to tell you how dangerous these radioactive rays can be. So climate change. If you can see these green parts and you can see these brown parts, you notice that there is a change. The climate here is very good. The grasses are green, the weather is blue. But if you notice here, the grasses are not even doing, there is not even grass coming out because the environment is already, the climate is already the weather is not okay. And if you can see everything, so have you noticed how we are changing from this green part to this down part, which is not good. So in climate change is the periodic alteration of the earth's climate caused by changes in the atmosphere as well as interaction between the atmosphere and various other geological, chemical, biological, and geographic factors in the Earth's system. So, as I told you earlier, that our human activities or what we do can go a long way to affect our climate because this weather we see today, see tomorrow, when we check the periodic weather for maybe subsequent years, you can be able to give up. That's why people give weather forecast. It's a prediction because it's what they have watched the weather maybe after 10 years, they'll be able to predict, is it going to rain this morning, is it going to be flooding, because of they vary a lot of things based on what has happened in the past to make predictions of the future, and the present what is also going on to make this prediction. That's why sometimes their predictions might not be right because there are a lot of activities which not everybody captures. So average weather condition within a periodic time gives rise to the climate change. That's why sometimes it used to be rainy, maybe it starts raining maybe in March, maybe now we now notice it start raining in maybe May, June. All these are climate change as a result of our human activities and average weather conditions. So climate is frequently defined as the average weather at a specific location, which includes factors like the temperature, precipitation, humidity, and witness. All these constitute to our weather. So a more specific can be maybe is the average state and variability of these features over a long period of time. So what causes climate change? There are a lot of factors which causes this climate change. We can talk about the solar variability, maybe volcanic activity, tectonic activity, greenhouse gases, feedback, human activity. So there are various factors which can affect our climate. So environmental pollution and its effect on health. If you can just take a look at this diagram, did you notice this place on the left and this place on the right? This place on the right, both the water, the land, and the air seems clear. But in the other side, both the water, the air, and the land, they don't seem clear. All this as a result of human activity, and it also affects our health. So we can run a lot of effects on this environmental pollution. It can cause cancer, neurobehavioral disorders, cardiovascular issues, decreased energy, premature death, and the rest of them. It can even cause reduced reproduction, slower growth and development. So all this has effects on our health. Environmental pollution and prevention. How do we prevent all this environmental pollution? How do we make our environment safe again for us to live? So environmental waste management and advancement of green chemistry. That means when we talk about green chemistry, what about if we plant more trees? Because you know these trees give soft oxygen and take CO2 from the environment. If you notice when you travel to the village, people whose village are still village, they have lots of trees. You notice that you receive more fresh air because there are lots of trees giving oxygen to the environment. Not in the city whereby they have cut all the trees to use them for furniture and the rest of them, and they are not ready to plant more. If we can cultivate the habit of trying to plant tree in any environment you find yourself, try to plant a tree if it's your own village, if you remember when you go travel to try and plant, even if an orange tree, just keep planting a tree. If you live in your own apartment in the town, you can try to plant a tree, because where you have an environment which is more aerated, because CO2, we cannot deny that, because we ourselves, as we are living together, we are assuming CO2. So if we can have more trees that will give us enough oxygen to balance the environment, it will really make our environment to be a safe place. Also, population growth needs to be restrained. If you can look at places like China, there was a time they decided to cut down their population, because they were so large, and taking care of, as people are, when your population is large, your pollutant will also be high, because people are releasing a lot of toxins to the environment. Forests ought to be expanded. We need to expand our forests, grow trees in our environment. Every citizen should understand that maintaining a clean, green environment is a social responsibility. Is a social responsibility for us to make sure that our environment is clean. So even though there are not enough resources for everyone to undo the harm that environmental pollution has done, prevention will gradually lead to better results. Even though it is not easy for us to get a clean environment as we see here, but we can put in our best. Little effort will channel us in the right direction. So there are different environmental laws in Nigeria that make sure that our environment is kept clean. We talk about the NESRA, that's the National Environmental Standard Regulation and Enforcement Agency. So these people make sure that the environments that they are responsible for protecting Nigeria's environment, enforcing that all environmental laws, regulation, guidelines are maintained to standard. We know we have our national oil spill detection. So these people make sure that they put into action that people don't spill oil. The way you see an industry spilling water inside an ocean or water body is not okay. So they make sure that we don't spill oil any place, or talk about the minerals and mining safety. So all these different environmental laws in Nigeria have their own works to make sure that they safeguard our environment and prevent us from pollution. We have the hydrocarbon oil resource oil refineries association. So there are several laws in Nigeria which we have in our textbook to safeguard us from all this pollution from occurring in our environment. So in conclusion, environmental pollution, hazard and climate change are inevitable in our environment. So proper assessment, control and management will go a long way in preventing us from all this pollution and make it habitable for us. So we see that we have come to live with these pollutions in our environment as a result of our technology and our human activities. So irrespective that advancement in technology has taken over a lot of things, we should also imbibe the culture of preventing ourselves from running the risk of all these hazardous things in our environment by using the proper PPE, maintaining safe cultures, even just making sure that once you come back from school each day, that you make sure you wash your hands, you cut your nails, doing the little ones, making sure that any environment you are is neat, tidy up where you are, even if you to make sure that when you come to classes you don't dump refuse, because you yourself will inhale those things which you leave there. So if we can imbibe little cultures that make sure that our environment is neat, we can reduce the risk of all this environmental pollution. Thank you for listening.